as temperatures globally are increasing, the effects on climate are becoming more and more noticeable, whether that's flooding, more hot days, poor air quality. Those are the types of things that are impacting our communities in urban zones. Hurricane Sandy had a catastrophic effect on the eastern seaboard. Homes were lost, lives were lost. Infrastructure across the board was shown to be inadequate for a storm event of that size and duration.
In the face of climate change, we're going to have to do more measures than just absorbing the first inch of rainfall. We need to really prepare for more intense flooding events, particularly in our East Coast cities. And Hoboken has really been a national leader in terms of being in front of that change and that adaptation. Hoboken's participated in this national initiative in the Obama administration called Rebuild by Design, which was really trying to think about how do we build back in more innovative ways, in more thoughtful ways. How do we really address climate change in our communities? The project that Hoboken came up with was really thinking about all the components that go into managing stormwater.
Anytime that the city of Hoboken sees more than 0.8 inches of rain per hour, that is considered an intense rainfall event that is going to result in flooding of Hoboken's most low-lying areas. And so the goal of resiliency parks, or parks as defense, is to manage stormwater, keep it out of the storm sewer system so that the sewer system can manage the rainfall as it comes in and then release that detained rainwater after the storm event. So it's effectively delaying the stormwater from entering the combined sewer system and then discharging it after the storm. So we actually call this part of our comprehensive water management strategy, which is to resist coastal flooding, to delay stormwater from entering the combined sewer system, to store stormwater in the combined sewer system during a storm event, and to actively discharge it after the storm event. So the Northwest Resiliency Park is one of a series of parks as defense projects. Our first point of collaboration, I think, was with North Hudson Sewerage Authority. North Hudson Sewerage Authority owns and operates Hoboken's combined sewer system. So we knew that a big goal of the park was to manage as much stormwater as possible from Northwest Hoboken, the H6 and H7 sewer sheds. So North Hudson Sewerage Authority also looked at this park as an opportunity to achieve some of the water quality goals in their long-term control plan. Through this, our combined goal in partnership with NHSA is to reduce the number of combined sewer overflow events from approximately 4 per month to 4 per year. So we really see this as a flood mitigation and a water quality project, and a great partnership with NHSA.
Myself and my colleagues were overjoyed when we saw this project opportunity because it fully embodied resiliency and a forward-thinking approach to public space planning, what a park could mean to a neighborhood and a city, and a true investment in getting it right, in putting infrastructure in an innovative, socially conscious way at the forefront of the project to really have the public good as the topmost priority.
Really trying to think about, well, how do you build infrastructure that a lot of it you don't see? How do you build it in a way that people see it, see the connection, and it builds physical and social resilience? And we saw that with a proposal that said, let's build a park, but let's build an incredible piece of stormwater infrastructure at the same time. And when you see that kind of thinking, and you see that track record there in Hoboken, we knew this was a project to really be a part of, because there's that far-sighted thinking there and that really robust commitment to the city's future. The resiliency that we see in the Northwest Resiliency Park is really at 2 levels. It's both a physical design and it's also really building on the social capital of community.
The physical resiliency might be more obvious: flood control, stormwater management, providing more green spaces, reducing impervious surfaces. But it's also important to look at it from a social point of view. Communities need places of refuge. They need to know that they feel safe. They need to know that there's a place for them to interact and build relationships, to come together as a community and support each other. So this last year, in terms of a global pandemic, which is another unprecedented impact on our society, has really put the focus on resiliency in a new way. It's forced us to look at that definition, especially from a social angle, in a different context.
The ways that we normally meet and see each other has changed. But one thing that cities have found that they needed more than ever is actually places for people to go outside so that they can gather and see each other safely and make those connections. Because along with the epidemic of disease, there's been a loneliness epidemic. And what we see with building parks and having park spaces is this tremendous need to connect. And that's what we see in building a park like this, is this creating this place where people can really come together, connect and support each other, especially in a difficult time like this. And we think this park is going to be that resource for the long haul.
My man over here, I saw you before. Come through. You got something really nice and shiny on your neck, bro.
So what are we doing here today?
Here in our pop-up park, we're getting people here to talk about the future, and the future is something that we talk about, it's something that you draw, it's something that you see. The potential here is amazing. We're going to store over 1 million gallons of stormwater to prevent water pollution and to prevent flooding. And at the same time, we're going to make the biggest green space that Hoboken has. And basically, we're getting everybody's ideas here today. We don't care what age you are. We want to hear from all ages, all backgrounds, to make this a park that you can exercise in, that you can relax in, and that you can just be Hoboken in.
From the very beginning of the Northwest Resiliency Park, we knew that this was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city of Hoboken, especially the northwest end of the city that really didn't have a tremendous amount of open space. This was going to be Hoboken's biggest park and Hoboken's biggest resiliency park. So we knew that we wanted the community to be as involved as possible in the design development. So we outlined through our scope of work for our engineering consultant, what we really wanted was an integrated team that had landscape architects, that had engineers, that had urban designers, that would come together and get the community's best ideas, bring them together with their best design ideas to create this world-class park.
Design is an act of collaborative intelligence when you're working in the public realm. It's not one singular great idea driving it. It's a whole bunch of ideas getting together and everybody feeling that they can believe in this at the end of the day.
Collective intelligence of the community that we were working with was very high. The community didn't need things explained to them or their handheld. They understood the concepts of what we were doing. They understood that we were moving earth that had contamination in it and that needed to be done safely. They understood that they didn't want to see floodwaters impacting their local businesses and streets the way it had during Hurricane Sandy. So they knew that we needed to put in infrastructure improvements to do that. So it was important to not just explain what the finished top of the park would look like, what the playground would look like, what the ice rink or fountains would look like. We wanted them to know that we were really taking the time and investing the resources into making sure we were handling floodwater and on-site soil contamination in the most responsible, safest, and effective way possible so that that top civic final look of a beautiful park could be achieved. We had a very robust community engagement program that included meeting the community where they were, going to the local parks and playgrounds, going to the local athletic fields, going to the local harvest festival on the pier, and meet people where they were, introduce ourselves, what was happening at the park, and getting feedback on the spot, and also letting them know of further big public meetings or charrettes happening down the road and inviting them to attend.
We had meetings, we had surveys, tried to get as much digital and in-person engagement as we could. And we also tried to find different ways to reach people. And the pop-up park became this really great place for us to gather feedback from the community. So there was an event there, specifically the Youth City Challenge, which was kind of a youth obstacle race. And we used that opportunity to have kids come out and explain what they envisioned as the future of their park. We actually gave them, each piece of paper to draw what they saw as the future. They were drawing with sidewalk chalk. We were kind of hanging everybody's ideas together to see a collective vision of what the youth, the future of who was going to use this park, wanted to see in it.
Even though this is the largest park in Hoboken, there's a lot of need. There's right locally in where the residents are living in the neighborhood, but across the city as well. So you had to figure out how to balance those resources. And the way that we did it was we talked a lot, we met a lot, and we laid everything out on the table, literally, for people. So we put things out like sports here and nature here, and wanted to see the proportion of, what did people latch on to? What did they talk about? How did they bring it together in their heads? Taking information from digital surveys, from manning tables and having people fill out the surveys physically, from recording conversations. But the most important thing is that you're getting all that information and you're beginning to assemble a good design story with it. That's built on analysis, built on solid engineering thinking, built on creative design. And then we made these wonderful physical models and got them in front of people. And at the end of the day, people said, yeah, that's our story.
We got some really, really great feedback, and a lot of which was ultimately incorporated into the final design. Things like a multi-purpose athletic field, things like a great lawn where people could see movies and concerts, a spray area and an ice rink. Well, I think the biggest lesson we learned through this project is the community's first. Hoboken approaches every project with our residents in mind and what our residents want to get out of that project. And this was really a prime example of a long and iterative community engagement process that lasted for almost 2 years, I think, and continues now through the construction process, in which we sought their feedback at every step of the way. So I think involving your community, getting the buy-in and the feedback and the stakeholder engagement is really important, because they're going to be the ones using these parks, and they're going to be the ones who you're going to want them to love the park, right? So the biggest lesson that we learned, I think, is involve the community early and often. The site is formerly known as the Cognis-Henkel site. It was a brownfield that had been contaminated through production of industrial products over the years. The resulting pollution on the site from the brownfield use was capped so that it would be safe for recreational use. And we were fortunate enough to be able to create a pop-up park on that location. So that pop-up park was there basically from 6 months after we acquired the property, all the way through the groundbreaking for the Northwest Resiliency Park.
So the city of Hoboken is a great example of frequent urban site challenges. The large portion of the city was built on marshland, as a lot of cities that occupy coastal territory in the United States were.
So we began to take pieces of that history and that place, and we actually took a lot of inspiration from it, and inspiration from the constraints. It's a very wet site, right? Because it's a lowland area. So we began to think, well, yeah, we're not going to have a whole lot of dryland species, or we're not going to have a lot of hills, but how can we celebrate that? So we created these incredible wet meadows that become thresholds to the park.
As part of the development of the Northwest Resiliency Park, we wanted to obviously be budget conscious, and disposing of contaminated soil is very costly. But we also wanted to be as sustainable as possible about it. And one of the best ways we could do that was to take the soils, use what soils we could on the site, and use them to create topography and to create interest. So our very creative design team was able to make sure that we had zero net fill on the site by basically using any excavated soil to create topography and then recreating that engineered cap above it.
We have community center, and it's on top of this plaza. We had to get that plaza above the floodplain to create this area of gathering, but also this area of refuge. But we had to make it so that we wouldn't be pushing floodwater against any of our adjacent neighbors. So we had to build and sculpt the land in ways that were capturing water, we're not pushing water out, but it actually led to, I think, a more interesting shape to the park that, went from something being, completely flat to something that is managing a brownfield, creating a meadow, this overland plaza. It's wrapped with these kind of great woodland trees that connote the uplands of the Palisades, and has this kind of like wonderful bulkhead wall that becomes this climbing wall for the play valley.
It's kind of a way of reuse that allows the soil to to remain, and makes the project more cost effective, but also makes it very safe for recreational use.
We wanted to capture and manage 1 million gallons of stormwater to relieve over 30 CSO events happening into the Hudson River from Hoboken annually. We wanted to eliminate local nuisance flooding from overtaxed stormwater inlets and infrastructure for local residences.
The Northwest Resiliency Park is unique in the sense that it uses green infrastructure at the surface, and I would say a gray infrastructure tank below the surface. So we have a tank underground that can withhold approximately 1 million gallons of rainwater during a storm event. That rainwater is going to be directed to the site from Northwest Hoboken through a conveyance system that NHSA will be constructing. At the surface of the site, the green infrastructure will manage all of the stormwater from the park itself, including the athletic field, as well as some of the adjacent roadways and sidewalks. And so that green infrastructure then will overflow into the 1 million gallon detention tank. So we'll actually be detaining up to 2 million gallons of stormwater during intense rainfall events. And that's water that then won't be on our street and won't be in people's basements.
When we break down further what the types of best management practices we were using for the surface park infrastructure, we really used a variety of practices. At the perimeter of the site, we have a number of tree trenches and stormwater bump outs. So those work both as traffic calming measures and to capture runoff from the adjacent streets. More internally to the park, at all of the corners of the park, are what we call stormwater gardens. Each of those kind of creates a green water management threshold that people have to move through just to enter the park. So we wanted to reinforce visually and experientially right from the start that you enter this park through its infrastructure. Each of those stormwater gardens is occupiable in a different way, whether it's benches along the edge, pedestrian bridges through them, or a boardwalk with a pollinator amphitheater at the center of it.
In these wet meadows, you cross through these boardwalks. And these boardwalks, are reminiscent of the wood plank walks that people actually used to walk through the marshland here. So we're actually getting parts of the history and the story and making place out of it.
So we had a number of incredible consultants on this project. Our play design consultant, Studio Ludo, came up with a world-class, universally accessible playground design. And then it was also then part of our job as the civil engineers and collaboration with them and the landscape architects to make that design also serve a stormwater purpose, right? So we really worked together to pick the appropriate safety surface that would also allow for water infiltration. We ended up using engineered wood fiber with an underdrain system to capture, store, and convey stormwater. We also came up with a very innovative play feature. It's a water runnel river system that has a hand pump to pump water out. Kids can play with it, and it also conveys water to the end. And one of our favorite BMPs is the basketball court on site is sunken, and all of the seat walls around it, which in dry weather serve as seating for everyone watching or playing the game, in wet weather serve to provide 2 feet of stormwater storage, and the basketball basin essentially acts as a detention basin that can fill up and drain out to provide further management on site. So it's that kind of integrated approach to, again, physical plus socially resilient best management practices that we took throughout the project. I think the biggest technical takeaway or lesson learned is really a way of thinking that I would impart to my fellow design professionals, is to answer the question for yourself every time you design a stormwater feature, what is the feature doing when it's not raining? And if you can answer that question in a way that results in something that's of public use, then I think you've really done your job. And I think we can answer that question on every project with every type of stormwater BMP that we put in place, then we're going to have a really vibrant and resilient public realm that we've created to live in. From a social perspective, this was the largest publicly owned parcel in the city. So we wanted to make sure we really got right the mix of civic, institutional, and flexible programming space. So not only could the local neighborhood, but the city at large take advantage of all the programming, passive and active recreation that we were packing into the park.
There's all these constituents that we're trying to balance those needs together and get the most out of every park that we develop, because we are 1 square mile. We are one of the densest cities in the United States with more than 55,000 residents. So those 55,000 residents need somewhere to get outdoors. They need to exercise. Kids need to play. They need recreation space for school. So our parks have to serve so many people and so many functions.
We did a comprehensive needs assessment in combination with city personnel to look at every recreational facility, every community facility that the city had. We took inventory of every ball field, playground, community center, basketball court, and then we looked at what was missing. And then we compared that to and coupled that with the feedback we were receiving from community members to see what was the highest priority elements that people were looking for that the city also did not already have, because this was going to be one of the last opportunities to put it in if something was missing. So that was some of the decision-making process that went into picking those specific site elements.
So building a place, a park where you could find your own space, came together in a lot of ways. We have this great lawn where, everybody can kind of informally gather, but you can also have a little event there as well. And it kind of is backfilled by that upper terrace plaza, which on top of that is this community center. There's other parts that is this French parterre area where it's like a quiet little reading garden. Then on the terrace itself in the summer, there's a fountain, a splash fountain that you could take your kids. And in the wintertime, it's an ice rink. So there's this kind of like cross seasonality to it. And then right below it is the Play Valley. It's a place where everybody in the community's got something. There's also this kind of like wonderful walks that we have that take you through these kind of varying experiences as you go through the park. Sometimes you're out in the open, sometimes you're in this kind of like little wooded area where you see these kind of understory blooms, and then you're out into these wet lowland meadows that I think are going to be just amazing in spring. I think that's really a park with a lot of experiences, from active children shouting to a place you're like, oh, I can just read this and be in my quiet moment. Then we have this great sports field. You have little league baseball play. You have soccer. It has like all this kind of multi-purpose quality to it, so that the field can always be in action. So that's this kind of like perfect like triangle that we were going for was, could it be natural? Could it be cultural? And could it be athletic? And in 6 acres, that's a challenge, but we did it.
Early at the planning stages, we wanted this park to be as accessible as possible. We wanted it to incorporate Hoboken's bicycling and pedestrian ordinances. We wanted the park to be walkable. So we didn't want it to be a vehicular driving destination as much as we wanted people to feel like they could just walk down the block or hop on their bike and be there in 10 minutes. So we tried to do everything we could to encourage that. All of the major intersections surrounding the park have traffic calming treatments to make it clear that they are pedestrian gateways to any oncoming vehicular traffic. Bicycle lanes have been restriped and reworked and updated around the entire perimeter of the park and leading up to it. Traffic patterns around the park were reviewed and are being altered and updated as part of this process to make the park happen. There's even a portion of one street that was bisecting the park that is being closed down and made fully integrated into the park. So again, the priorities for the project were clear from the start, and it was the community and creating a great piece of public infrastructure that was also a great community gathering park space. We were able to stick to those values throughout the entire project. We've talked about what a complex park project this is and all the stakeholders involved. It's an expensive public piece of infrastructure that's being realized here. And so a lot of different people are contributing to make sure that's financially possible. I think when funds are limited, projects need to take on multiplicity. They need to be able to accomplish more than one end. I think one of the best ways to do that is to overlap public infrastructure projects like this one with community needs projects.
The Northwest Resiliency Park is meant to be multi-benefit. So we're looking at funding through infrastructure, funding for parks, funding for play, funding for cultural resources, right? So we looked at any and all funding opportunities, and we still are. Even as the project has already been funded for construction, we're still looking at ways to offset that those funding obligations. So the first place we turned to was the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, formerly the Environmental Infrastructure Trust. And funding through the iBank has been just critical to this project. Not only were we able to fund through the iBank because of the water quality benefits of the project through the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, but we were also able to finance through the iBank due to the brownfield remediation components of the project and the fact that the project is effectively redeveloping a brownfield site. So we were able to leverage the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank for what totals more than $16 million in financing savings over the life of the project. So we are looking to leverage the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank low interest loan financing as well as principal forgiveness. We received $2 million in principal forgiveness for the use of green infrastructure, and then offsetting those financing costs through grant funding. So we were fortunate enough this year to be selected for the first round of the BRIC program, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's a new funding stream for resilient infrastructure projects that mitigate hazards. And this is really a prime example of a hazard mitigation project. We are mitigating rainfall flooding, and that enabled us to apply for this FEMA grant, which is now going to offset the project by approximately $10 million. In addition, the North Hudson Sewerage Authority applied to the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for their costs to build the pumping station that's part of the project, and they received a $4 million grant from FEMA. So together, the project is actually leveraging about $14 million in FEMA grant money. In addition, we've had great partners at Hudson County. Hudson County has always been an amazing supporter of recreation and open space in the city of Hoboken, and they've so far to date provided $500,000 to the development of the active recreation components on the Northwest Park site. And we are, fingers crossed, hopefully going to be receiving $500,000 in addition this current fiscal year grant round through the Open Space Trust Fund, Hudson County. So, you know, we're leveraging grant funding from all levels of government, county, state, you know, federal grant monies, as well as the low interest loan financing from the New Jersey iBank. And together, that's really been a significant cost savings to the taxpayers of Hoboken.
When conceiving of a project of this scale, it's inherently collaborative. When you factor in funding sources coming from not only state but a federal level, when you factor in the desires of the Hoboken administration team, when you factor in local residences and the larger body of the full city, adjacent communities that may want to come and rent out the facilities, the impact you're having on your adjacent waterway, the Hudson River. There's a lot of people who have a lot to say about how a project like this takes place. So I have to applaud the city of Hoboken for the forethought and planning that went into conceiving of this park, putting together the right strategic plan for the city as a whole, and then taking measured step after measured step along the way to collaborate with the right partners, to make sure those partners were included in every step of the decision-making process, and at the end have true group collaboration and consensus. And it's a real act of collaborative intelligence that took place to arrive at the final design of the park.
You know, we sought to build really a landmark park for the city of Hoboken, as well as for the state of New Jersey and the country. We want this to be a model of parks as defense. We're in a time where every dollar has to be stretched as far as it can. And if the city can invest a dollar in a capital project that provides physical resilience, social resilience, community building, public health, you know, all the environmental benefits of green infrastructure, from flood mitigation to improving air quality. We want to get as many benefits from our capital investments as we can. So we are seeing this as really a multi-benefit project that is parks, it's infrastructure, and it's really community building all at the same time.
Cities need to think comprehensively about their green spaces, in terms of like looking at the future and thinking about, how are we building more equitable cities? How are we making people healthier and more connected? It really is, we need a comprehensive drive for connected open spaces, because they are part of dealing with our problems of social equity. It's part of the way that we're going to get in front of the climate crisis. But it's going to take a lot of planning. We need to know how natural systems really are interfacing with our cities. We need to know what different communities need. And we need to think comprehensively about the value that we're creating for everyone. So the necessity of planning and acting on it, I think Hoboken again is living that example, thinking comprehensively about their city. But it's not just about stormwater. It is about a whole range of outcomes for the future that we need to connect to right now.